Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the idea of freedom, why it was so important in the texts that we've read, specifically who discussed it and what the idea of freedom meant to them, and what freedom means to America now and Americans who live in America. Before America was even created, it was defined by this desire for freedom. William Bradford, a Puritan separatist who's in fear of the Church of England, escaped to the Netherlands initially for safety. He says, "Yet seeing themselves thus molested, and that there was no hope of their continuance there, by joint consent they resolved to go into the Low Countries, where they heard was freedom of religion for all men." This establishes the American desire for freedom very early on, and his determination to follow his own religious freedom and practices set the standards. And now the value of choosing to live your own life and taking that power was very important, and it stuck around as the nation began to develop. One of these writers who was writing in the developing American nation was Anne Bradstreet, and through her poetry, specifically in the prologue, she says that a poet's pen all scorn I should thus wrong, for such despite they cast on female wits. If what I do prove well, it won't advance. They'll say it's stolen or else it was by chance. Here, Bradstreet critiques the way that women are seen in the literary world. She claims that they disregard her and excuse her work by saying it's a fluke or it's chance because she's a woman. Bradstreet wants this mindset to change, and she wants all women's intellectual abilities to be fully recognized. Society, ignoring her works and writing them off as unworthy, infringed on her freedom of expression, and Bradstreet uses her poetry to push back against the standards and question why women's writings are not as respected in society. Another woman author that represents early American ideas of freedom was Phyllis Wheatley. Wheatley writes about her wish to live in a world free of slavery so that nobody has to experience the same horrors that she did. She frames this scenario as if she's talking to God about her love of freedom. She says, "Should you, my lord, while you peruse my song, wonder from whence my love of freedom sprung, I, young in life, by seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Afric's fancied happy seat." With this section, she conveys the message that black people are also under God's grace, using the point of view of God to humanize her. Here she explains that she has a special love for freedom because of the experiences with her freedom in Africa being taken away. So, recently in the media, the Israel and Hamas war has been constantly in circulation. The nature of the conflict and the morality of each side is in debate every day. The awareness around this conflict is especially high in the younger generation because of social media getting information around so quickly. This has led to many groups forming in support of Palestine in universities and colleges all across America, although not everybody shares their point of view. Like at the Brandeis University, where the president issued a statement announcing that the university would no longer recognize their chapter of the National Students for Justice in Palestine. He claims that the group supports Hamas and their violence towards the Jewish people. So, to promote such free exchange, we must not and do not condone hate, the incitement of violence, or threats against or harassment of anyone, be they Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Israeli, Palestinian, or any other religion or ethnicity. With this conflict, we can see that there are still fears among the American population of threats against their religion. This limits their freedom of religion because they won't be able to practice in public without feeling threatened or discriminated. Along with anxieties surrounding religious freedoms, we see that there are still examples of women's freedoms being unconsidered and their value being neglected in American society. Even in this age, we see that policies like the SAVE Act raise controversies surrounding women's freedoms. This act requires the voter to provide a birth certificate or passport in order to vote, but this can be restricting to married women. Not many people have a passport in general, unless they traveled outside the US, and women who are married who have had their last names changed will not have their name appear the same way as their birth certificate. Along those same lines, this has potential to affect the LGBTQ plus community as well, as people who transition will often change their names, those of which who legally change their names would run into these same issues. While there are systems in place to get that information that's needed, it would include providing additional documentation which may not be easily accessible. These extra hurdles would restrict women, transgender, and many other people's freedoms to vote by making the process difficult and time consuming. In the new millennia, we also see the issues of racial injustice, and the restriction of rights for people of color is still very pervasive in America. Harold Stolper writes about his investigation into overpolicing in New Neighbors and the overpolicing of communities of color. He monitored minor quality of life complaints in different neighborhoods and found that, in spite of their relative infrequency, summons and arrest outcomes are 3 times as common in lower income communities of color with high influx of white residents compared to lower income, high influx communities that were already predominantly white in 2011. Since the communities of color were so much more likely to receive summons arrest for minor complaints in comparison to the white communities, we can see that there are still struggles to maintain freedom in American society. These unequal treatments were what Phyllis Wheatley had advocated against. With these early American texts, we see what freedoms each author valued. Bradford wanted his religious freedoms from the Church of England. Bradstreet wanted women to have the freedom to be recognized for their intellectual prowess, and Wheatley wanted the world to be free of enslavement and racial prejudice. All of them fought for their beliefs through their writing, and now, through the internet and social media, the same issues of freedom are now discussed through the internet. Social media and online articles have maintained the same intentions as writers of the past, protecting one another's freedoms and sticking up to those that are oppressed. The medium is what has changed most significantly. In early American times, they didn't have the wireless, instant, and global communications that we do now. Because of this new technology, our perspectives has shifted, and now it allows more people to see the injustices that happen around the world and speak up against the oppressors who take away or diminish people's freedoms.